Hello Gravely fans, Roger here. I am going to try to explain how a Gravely two-speed differential works for two-wheelers. And also it would work the same way in a older 400 series four-wheeler. This is a modern, new style, post 1971 bronze worm gear. This one is a casting, a machine casting. The gear would normally be mounted right between these two side plates. This one I have removed and created a little mock-up so we can see what's happening inside. Before we get to this, I'm going to take a look at an older style. This is the older style. This would be the right-hand side from an operator's position. This component is called a shifting gear. This component here is called the clutch housing. It's got a bearing mounted on it. I can't pull that off right now. Okay, clutch housing, shifting gear on the right side. This you may recognize as a shifting pin mounted in the right side axle housing. Works with that lever and a linkage pushing the clutch sliding pin to either engage the clutch housing or engage the stationary clutch, which is mounted down inside here and held in place with this big old pin. No need to ever remove this, but that I took it out so you could see. This is called the stationary clutch. This is called the sliding clutch. This is called the clutch housing. Okay, old style. Old style has a spider pin with shifting gear, differential gears, and these are called thrust spacers. Some people call them shoes. The problem with the old style thrust spacers is they wore. These were made out of powdered metal in a precision metal casting. As they wore into the bronze gear. They wore so much sometimes that there's a ridge. Well, what problem does that cause? The spacers, thrust spacers, as they wore out themselves and as they wore into the bronze, started moving out on the spider pins. When they move out far enough, that allows the differential gear to start playing with what's called the spider gear. I'm sorry, allows it to play with the shifting gear. This is a differential gear. Only these four little ones are spider gears. This differential gear drives the axle. It works inside the shifting gear. It's free to turn independent of the shifting gear. This is the left side of a differential assembly. One thing I'd really like to point out is this shifting gear. It is pinned right to the side of the left. You can't turn that gear independent of the left side. Okay? Something unique happens. On the right side, the shifting gear can turn independent of the side. Boy, we're getting into it now. Let's try and put some of this back together. Okay, the point was the left side shifting gear is locked. The right side shifting gear is free to turn depending upon the shifting clutch. When the shifting clutch, if it'll go on for me, when the shifting clutch is locked against the differential as such, then it's saying that the clutch sliding pin is all the way into the right axle housing. That is pushing that shifting clutch against the clutch housing. The unit turns as one. It still has the ability to have differential action. When a wheel goes around a corner, notice that the big gears, the shifting gears, aren't moving. It's the innermost gears, the differential gears, differential action. Okay. Now things are going to get sticky. We're going to take the clutch sliding pin and we're going to pull the clutch, sliding clutch, so that it engages the stationary clutch. Well, I mentioned that this big pin locks the stationary clutch. So, when you do that, by the way, right there, if you ever look down at your right axle housing and see the shifter something like that, you're in no gear. That's almost looks like it's in low gear, but that's low gear. When that pin is almost right over the aluminum bearing oil seal housing. Okay, let's shift to high. That's all the way into high now. Same old action. Shift into low. We have just locked the right shifting gear. This gear right here. It can no longer turn. I'm going to put this little rubber stopper here just to hold the pin out. Look what's happening. The right shifting gear is not turning. The left shifting gear, this guy over here, he is turning with the side, the left side. They're pinned together. So what in the world is happening? Well, the left shifting gear is turning the shifting gear on the spider pin. And the spider pin and gear are climbing around the stopped right shifting gear. But as these spider pins climb around the stopped shifting gear, they're carrying the spider pin along with it. Let's see what that looks like. Notice I'm going to try turning my two hubs. I don't have wheels. I don't have the weight of the tractor on here. I want you to notice the speed of the hubs turning compared to the speed of the differential assembly turning. Notice that the differential turns about 50% faster than the hubs. Well, the way the tractor is driven, the worm gear turns, the lead worm turns the worm gear turns these. I don't have the weight on the hubs, no wheels, so we can't see what's, if I try to turn this. There's no weight involved. But you can see that if this hub's turning twice as fast as, if this differential gear assembly is turning twice as fast as the hubs, then the hubs must be turning half as fast as the differential. It still has differential action, even in low gear, no problems. It's quite an amazing assembly, really. It took me a while to get my head around it, and even longer to try and explain it. Okay, some changes. This stationary clutch is a 3-cog. This shifting clutch is a 3-cog. They came out with 3-cog along about 67 or 68. Before that, they had 5-cog. I don't know exactly why they needed 5. 3 seemed to be easier to make and machine. The big difference was going from this gear to this gear. You can see that that's a bronze casting which has been machined. This one has no casting marks. I wonder if it was made out of a solid billet of bronze. That'd be expensive. And even the weight wise, this weighs twice as much as this. So they went with the casting. They removed all this meat between the mounting bolts to save weight, to save material. This gear cannot use the newer style spider pins. There isn't enough room inside. It can be machined, opened up in here, and one slot cut through the sides to the opening so that you can take a spider pin along the two, tip it in there, and then install it. Some of these have been, I have even remachined these to save the gear because it was in good condition. And these, trying to buy a new one, was a more expensive option. Okay, one other thing, if you get inside one of these and you're working with this clutch sliding pin comes off the fork. You may need to do that if you wanted to replace down inside this hole. Down inside that hole, there's an O-ring for an oil seal on this shaft. You'd have to take this apart to get in there with a hook and remove that oil seal and replace it. Little rubber O-ring. When you put this back together, you may be tempted to thread this all the way to the shoulder. That is not correct. You only thread it till it's flush with the shifting fork. That's the way it's supposed to be. I think I've covered it, and thank you.